like I said, the First Amendment, it doesn't really matter if you have a constitutional right to free speech, if your free speech isn't protected by the corporations and the people that are controlling our means of information. Is that a correct concern?
Yeah, it's funny when we think about, this First Amendment discussion as it relates to big tech, it's always binary. People say, well, it's their First Amendment right. And so that's the end of the story. But it's not that at all, because as you point out, our First Amendment rights are also sort of are interplaying in this space. And you think about, I call these the network effects of the big platforms, right? The content moderation practices they engage in, which is essentially, I'm going to amplify this content, suppress other content, doesn't exist in a vacuum. And because these companies are so dominant, it has, trickle down effects that impact independent thought, free minds, market access. There's a ton of other stuff that's going on downstream from these companies exercising, what is their First Amendment right. But I also think it ignores the fact that the companies are exercising their First Amendment right in a privileged manner, right? Section 230, which is the provision of law that grants all these big tech companies, all kinds of immunities for content posted on their site, but also the ability to take down content without recourse. That is a privilege afforded to them by the law that other outlets don't have. Newspapers don't have that. Movie studios don't have that.
Right.
Other First Amendment actors are not protected in that way. So it's not merely a question of these companies are just exercising their First Amendment. There's a whole lot of context that statement has to be couched in to fully understand, both the practicality and the sort of magnitude of the issue that we're dealing with.
Do you think there are some Republican lawmakers that are waking up to this? I mean, it seems like people like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley have at least attempted to go after these companies, and maybe it's because they're younger than some of the other lawmakers. They seem to understand what's going on a little bit more. Do you think those efforts will ultimately make any difference?
I think that what Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz have done is helpful. And I think everybody's sorting out right now the best way to go about addressing the type of problem that we've never seen before. We've never seen corporations have this much control over our thought, over our speech, over, what we can buy and what we can say and who can say it. And so I think they're all sort of a little bit struggling with how to address that without, to the point that you raised earlier, growing the government. But this is the legislative process. It's iterative, right? People just don't wake up with a perfect solution.
Yeah.
You sort of work toward it. And I think that's the effort that they're engaged in. But there's a very clear line between what Republicans want to do and what Democrats want to do. Because when you listen to Democrats talk about addressing these tech companies, they want to censor all kinds of speech. Any speech they disagree with, they want removed. And Republicans, by and large, take the opposite approach that says, no, the answer to bad speech is not less, it's more speech. And so I think that they're trying to, find the best way to address that question. And again, a lot of them focus on Section 230 reform. I think that they should also be focused on antitrust enforcement, because I think a lot of these speech concerns are downstream from the fact that there's only 3 major platforms in America that control kind of how our speech and what we can see, and that's Facebook, Google, and Twitter.
Yeah.
That's a problem. And I think we should be more curious as to why there's only 3 major platforms.